When Water and I went to visit his parents, my mother-in-law came to pick us up at the airport and said, "You can ride in the car, so you'll have to walk home." She snorted and turned her nose up at me. The walk was a 3-hour journey one way. Even though I'm physically strong, this treatment was too much, and I almost cried. But in the end, someone stepped in to help me. It was my mother-in-law, who regretted her actions later. My name is Jennifer. I'm 30 years old and married. I love mountain climbing, and I met my husband, Water, who is 2 years younger than me, in a college mountain club. Water is handsome and popular with women, so when he asked me out, I wondered, why me? According to Water, he likes how I push forward silently, even on difficult trails, without complaining. Water works for a well-known company and earns a good salary. Since getting married, we've been happy, just like during our college days, but there's one thing that bothers me. Oh, it's a call from Mom. Sorry, I'll go talk to her, Water said during dinner, hurrying into his room with his phone. Water's mom calls him often, about once every 2 days. She seems to really adore her successful son, and Water is always kind to her, making me wonder if he's a bit of a mama's boy. But since she raised him well, I feel like I should respect her too. However, it seems she doesn't feel the same about me. This became clear before our wedding, when we went to meet his parents for the first time. Jennifer is 2 years older than my son and almost 30. My mother-in-law said, clearly unhappy with having an older daughter-in-law. She looked displeased the whole time. Water's father, however, was supportive and said, "It's fine, isn't it? Love conquers all." Jennifer seems dependable and is perfect for Water. Even though my father-in-law supported me, that seemed to irritate my mother-in-law even more. She couldn't openly oppose him, so she started picking on me when he wasn't around. "Oh dear, I'm sorry, Jennifer. It looks like the snacks I gave you have gone bad. Let me replace them," she said. But it was clearly intentional. She widened her eyes, snorted, and twisted her lips in a way that I started to recognize. I had become like a zoologist, able to read her expressions easily. I smiled and said, "Oh, it's okay. I can still eat it," and then cut off the bad part of the dried fruit. In my college mountain club, I learned the survival skills, including making the most of the food you have. Father-in-law and Water laughed and said, "That's just like Jennifer." Father-in-law added, "Honey, that's not good. Don't serve Jennifer something like that," keeping the mood light. But while everyone laughed, I noticed my mother-in-law giving me a sharp look and clicking her tongue. Another time, she proudly said, "Look, I went to Italy last week and bought souvenirs." She handed Water a fancy, branded tie. For me, she gave a cheap t-shirt with a fake-looking logo. It was clearly a knockoff. "Come on, try on the tie, Water and Jennifer. You should wear the shirt," she said. I realized it was just another way to insult me. I forced a smile and said, "Oh, no, I can't wear a tie with casual clothes," trying to keep things light. But inside, I was fed up. I ended up only using the t-shirt for things like reading in the summer or showing my friends as a joke in photos. I hated even looking at it. These little acts of harassment were subtle enough that only I would notice, and when I told Water, he'd just say, "Mom's a bit quirky, so forgive her." But little by little, her behavior started to wear me down. Living just an hour's drive away from my in-laws made it easy to visit them, which added to my stress. Then one day, Water told me, "Jennifer, I'm sorry for the sudden news, but I've been transferred. It starts next month, so we need to prepare." Though Water apologized, I was secretly relieved. This was a perfect excuse to put some distance between us and my in-laws. Plus, the new location was close to my parents' house, so it felt like we were moving from away to home. "Got it. Leave the preparations to me. I'll ask my family for help too," I said happily as I began making plans for the move. Now that we were moving, I thought I could finally escape my mother-in-law's constant petty harassment. While I was a bit nervous about starting our new life, most of them about 80% felt relieved and free from her. The move was finished, and I thought I could finally have some distance from her. But then, the phone rang. "Hello, Jennifer, where have you been?" Why didn't you answer the phone? You're not ignoring my son while hanging out at your parents' house again, are you? It was another call from my mother-in-law. I wanted to sigh heavily, but I held back and calmly replied, I'm sorry, I couldn't answer earlier. I was in line at the store. I've been making nutritious meals to support Walter since he's adjusting to this new environment. Despite us seeing each other less, my mother-in-law began calling every 2 days. Most of the time, she would make snide comments. My son is sensitive. I wonder if someone with thick skin like Jennifer can really understand him, she'd say. Or, his high school girlfriend was delicate and fragile. I guess his taste has changed quite a bit, hasn't it? She would say things just to make me uncomfortable. It seemed like my mother-in-law used me as her personal stress outlet. The hardest part was when she made comments about having children. Jennifer, you're already 30, right? What do you think about having kids? Do you think, since you're older than my son, you have a healthy baby? I was shocked that someone would say such a thing, especially nowadays, since I had already been worrying about this myself. I broke down in tears after hanging up the phone. Did my mother-in-law really think I wouldn't be hurt by her words? The calls kept coming, but I started giving safe, neutral responses just to avoid conflict. Maybe she got bored because her comments weren't having an effect anymore. And slowly, the number of calls decreased. I felt so relieved. Then, on New Year's Day the following year, my husband and I went to visit his parents. They were supposed to pick us up at the airport. Hey, Walter, Jennifer, long time no see. My father-in-law waved and greeted us warmly. I had been dreading seeing my mother-in-law, but his friendliness was a relief. Happy New Year, Mom and Dad. Happy New Year to you both, we said. My mother-in-law responded with, Happy New Year, Walter. Good to see you, but didn't even look at me. Maybe she was still upset about how I had handled her calls. The tension between us was obvious, and I was trying to figure out how to get through it. You must be tired from the trip. How about we take a break at the airport cafe? My father-in-law suggested cheerfully, not noticing the awkwardness. Oh, that sounds like a good idea. Isn't there a cafe on the second floor? Walter said, also in good spirits. So, we all headed to the cafe. Should I drive us back? I asked, trying to help. No, I'm still an active driver, my father-in-law responded. As the man chatted, my mother-in-law and I stayed silent. After we ordered, I stood up and said, Excuse me, I'm going to the restroom, eager to get a break from the tension. Oh, maybe I'll go too, my mother-in-law said as she stood up to follow me. I had a bad feeling about this. As we approached the entrance to the women's restroom, my mother-in-law, walking behind me, said, You can ride in the car, so why don't you walk back? I was confused and turned to look at her. She had that familiar expression again, as if she was saying that since we were returning as just a family of 3, I was a stranger. I couldn't believe what I heard. Walk back to my in-laws' house. How far would that be? And calling me a stranger. I was frowning in shock as my mother-in-law kept talking. I was kind enough to call you often, but you only respond coldly. Living near your parents has gotten to your head. I don't want to think of you as my daughter-in-law anymore. You're a stranger, a stranger. Her voice got louder. I was shocked, but I didn't want to argue in public, so I quietly replied, Yes, I understand. I didn't want to go back to where Walter and my father-in-law were, so I walked toward the airport exit, even though she told me to walk back. This was an airport, and there were taxis and buses. I could go as far as I could and then walk from there. But more than that, I worried about how I would face my in-laws after arriving on foot. How would I spend the few days of my visit? That weighed heavily on my mind. I searched on my phone for transportation to my in-laws' house. There was a bus leaving in just 10 minutes, but it wouldn't take me close to their house, so I would have to walk after that. It would take about 3 hours in total. 3 hours? I could walk that far with my legs trained from mountain climbing. It wasn't impossible, but there was a big difference between hiking in the mountains and walking, because I wasn't allowed in the car due to harassment. Tears filled my eyes. Wasn't it my fault? If I had just been nice on the phone, would this have happened? As I walked, lost in thought, I suddenly felt someone tap my shoulder from behind. Jennifer, why are you walking here? It was my father-in-law's voice. Didn't my wife say something to you at the restroom entrance? I was going to the restroom too, and I saw you two talking before you started to walk away. So I followed you. Looking at my father-in-law's kind face, the tears that had been welling up overflowed and ran down my cheeks. Jennifer, what on earth happened? I decided to tell him the truth. I explained everything my mother-in-law had said, and he became angrier than I had ever seen him. Oh dear, she said that to my son's wife, he exclaimed. Then, he surprised me by saying, I'll walk with you, Jennifer. With that, my father-in-law stood in front of me and began to walk beside me. Father-in-law, I said, don't worry, I enjoy mountain climbing, and I used to climb a lot with water when he was little. A 3-hour walk is nothing for me. My father-in-law had a firm stride, which was impressive for a 62-year-old. Come on, let's go, he said. As we walked, I suddenly remembered. We didn't tell Water we were leaving. Is that okay? Water will be fine. He'll probably wait for us. I'll contact him. Father-in-law pulled out his mobile phone and texted my mother-in-law, letting her know he was walking back with me and that the car keys were in his bag. While we waited for the bus, father-in-law's phone rang. His voice was filled with restrained anger as he answered, clearly speaking to my mother-in-law. I heard what you said to Jennifer. If you're going to say that, I won't ride in the car either. I could hear my mother-in-law's panicked voice shouting on the other end. That's not it. She said she wanted to walk for exercise. How brazen. I was more shocked than angry. We'll talk when we get home, he said, hanging up and shoving his phone into his pocket. Just then, my phone started ringing. It's definitely my mother-in-law, I said, looking at father-in-law. We exchanged glances. What does she want now? To tell us to ride in the car? I'm definitely not answering, I decided. We silently boarded the bus and continued walking after getting off. This way is a shortcut, father-in-law said. There's a slope here for a while, but let's do our best. With father-in-law occasionally giving advice, it felt like we were mountain climbing together. However, I hadn't planned on walking so much today, and I was wearing regular boots, while father-in-law wore leather shoes. This is going to hurt our feet, I thought. I hardly spoke, but I did ask once, father-in-law, are your feet okay? Won't walking for a long time in those shoes hurt? Father-in-law glanced at my feet and squinted. I guess we're both in the same boat. I can't believe she made you walk such a long distance in those shoes. We both thought about calling a taxi but didn't mention it, intending to spite my mother-in-law. Jennifer, you're strong for walking such a long distance without complaining, he said. Water must have been attracted to that quality in you. Hearing that made me feel a little happy. We continued walking, buying drinks from vending machines at a grocery store to stay hydrated. About 3 hours later, as the sun began to set, we finally arrived at my in-laws' house. Their car was parked in front. Mother-in-law and Water must be home, father-in-law said as he opened the front door. Water rushed over as soon as we stepped inside. Yeah, Jennifer, I was worried. What happened? Why did you suddenly decide to walk back for exercise? Did you hear that from Mom? That's not it, father-in-law said, looking understandably tired as he sat down on a chair near the entrance. My mother-in-law, who had just come out of the living room, looked pale and shocked. No, that's not it. It seems there was a misunderstanding. What misunderstanding? I couldn't hold back any longer. You said, since you can ride in the car, why don't you walk back? Didn't you? I hated lying, and it was frustrating to hear her twist the truth. This reminded me of my mountain climbing club. Days a 3-hour walk was good exercise for me. Water looked back at his mother. He knew I wasn't the type to lie. Father-in-law, Water, and I all focused on my mother-in-law. You believe this woman over me, she screamed. You think she's more important than your family. This woman is a stranger to you. I said quietly, so I wasn't allowed in the car because I'm a stranger. Water, clearly angry, clenched his fist, which was trembling. Ma'am, I can't believe you would say that. Jennifer is an important part of my family, and I wanted you to feel the same way. If you're going to treat Jennifer like this, I'm done with you. Ma'am, I won't answer your calls anymore. Don't contact Jennifer either. Walter took my hand and said, let's go. Walter, wait. But he slammed the door behind us and walked away without looking back, still holding my hand. A year later. Hey, Jennifer, over here. You can't see the view really well, Walter called out. And now, we were mountain climbing together with father-in-law. 6 months later, Walter received a transfer order, and we moved back to our old home. After the incident at the New Year celebration, father-in-law decided to get a divorce and move to a place near us. Climbing together on weekends had become a regular routine. Shall we have lunch here? I asked as we reached the summit, and we eagerly started preparing our meal. While we worked, father-in-law began to talk. Mom went on a spending spree after the divorce. Even though the property division was handled properly, it seems she's already in financial trouble. She might be feeling lonely. The divorce was hard for her, with all the crying and screaming. I think putting some distance between us now is probably best for both of us. She needs to expand her world, or else she'll take out her stress on those close to her. I listened silently, reflecting on our situation. I decided I would cherish my own life and happiness, so I wouldn't take out my stress on others. Looking at the beautiful view from the mountain with my beloved family, I made that promise in my heart.